Today we're speaking with David from Kite and Sup. How are you, David?
I'm well, thank you.
That's great. So you own and operate a kite, wing and windsurfing business at Warners Bay. Would you like to talk about your business?
Well, my business comes from teaching and coaching. So I worked with Andy Regan, who used to own Board Crazy, which was the original one of the windsurfing shops in Newcastle or Warners Bay. I worked with him for 14 years, and I originally came onto his business as a windsurfing instructor. So I taught windsurfing and school sports and lots of school kids for 3 years with him prior to moving into teaching kite surfing when the windsurfing school was sold and moved off, and was moved over to Marmong with the Marmong Windsurfing Club.
Okay, so you obviously have a passion and a love for the outdoors and adrenaline sports. What's your favourite sport out of those three: wing, kite, or windsurfing?
There's no favourite. It's the new sport of wing foiling or wing surfing is probably one of my favourites at the moment because it's very, very new. It's very progressive. And one of the biggest things is learning something new is always exciting and fun, and it's a sport with no boundaries and nothing's been set. And every week, every month, there's a new trick, there's a new part of that sport that's coming through.
And I guess it keeps you on your toes.
Oh.
Toes, feet, yeah, keeps you current.
So it's 70% of our business at the moment. Windsurfing has always been a physical sport. The boards originally, particularly back when windsurfing first started, the boards were very heavy, the sails, the booms. And when I was 6 years old, I used to jump on the sail and sink it till it was vertical in the water, and then climb on my board to stand on it and pull it up while it was vertical, because I couldn't physically pull it out of the water if it was laying flat. So, and over the years, windsurfing gear has gotten lighter, it has gotten more progressive, and the new rigs, they've now got inflatable windsurfing sails that float on the water to make the sport that much easier. The big thing with windsurfing, though, it's still quite a big board and you're pushing it across the water with a sail. So with windsurfing, you've got an inflatable sail that floats in the air.
Wow.
That you're basically holding down. And the board itself, because you're riding on a board with a foil underneath it, the foil creates lift, it comes up on the foil, and then you're coasting along on this foil, which is very, very efficient. So the foils are so efficient that when a lot of people practice behind a boat like they would on a wakeboard or something, that they actually, when they're holding the line goes slack.
Right.
Because they're riding so efficiently towards the boat.
Right.
The wing stuff is massive and it's growing really, really big, and you're going to see them popping up from lots of places. Yesterday, what I actually said was we are a windsurfing shop, and windsurfing has dropped to the level where on the East Coast there's probably maybe 4 or 5 windsurfing shops in Australia now, where back in the 80s there would have been 100 or 200 on the East Coast.
Right. Okay.
So the wing surfing or wing foiling, I already know that there's more shops doing that than what there are doing windsurfing.
Right. So it's quite a trend then these days.
A growing trend.
So for those people out there that want to try a new sport, where will people be able to find you?
Everybody contacts the shop in general, and we run the lessons based on the wind direction and the wind location. So we generally want a wind that's cross-shore, so people can go in and out and walk back up the shoreline, rather than winds that are onshore blowing people back on shore, or winds that are offshore blowing people out to sea.
That makes perfect sense to me. What was your most memorable moment or best experience?
For windsurfing, my favourite experiences were as a kid when I was about 16. So around that age, there was so many local windsurfing guys who were gurus, realistically, racing and competing in all over Australia, and some incredible local talents. Adam Quinn, who I used to look up to then, is someone who I work with now. Lars Pedersen, who was on did the Olympics.
Wow.
Is somebody who's now someone who I talk to every couple of days,
Yep.
and works in the industry. So that when I was young, we used to windsurf at Marmong Point.
Yep.
And we'd have the westerly winds. One of our young mates took some amazing photos back then on his bodyboard. And the guys would come into the point and they'd come in so fast on the windsurfer that if they crashed trying fancy jibes on the flat water, they'd go spinning across the top on the water on their back rather than just hit and fall in.
There you go. It's not a dirty word. Maybe it is, eh? So if someone were to take up one of these sports, what would they need to be self-sufficient and start, for example, like kite surfing?
Okay, so with kite surfing, the biggest thing about kite surfing is you need a large area.
Right.
So for rigging and setup, and kite surfing, kites are very, very powerful.
Yes.
You're looking at something that can easily launch people 30 metres into the air.
Wow.
So it can drag you very quickly across car parks and stuff. So kiteboarding is something that people need to have a lesson with before they attempt.
Right.
And it's one of those sports that there are casualties in kiteboarding throughout the world. So we encourage everybody with who's looking to get in kiteboarding that they need a lesson prior to buying gear.
Yeah.
And the gear they need a harness in order to attach their kite to. They need a bar and line set which attaches to the harness, and then a leash which goes from the harness to the kite, and from the harness to the bar. So if they're using their releases, then they don't lose it. Yep. But the releases themselves all need quick releases so they can release if need be. The kites themselves, they need the right size kite for their ability and for their weight.
Yep.
Plus they'll need a pump to pump it up with, and then they'll need a board, and the board will need foot straps and will be of a size that'll suit their riding, or of a style that'll suit their riding.
Right. So I guess it's like OH&S and PPE, really, if you want to say it in that respect, before you attempt something. Test out your gear, make sure you've got the appropriate supplies, which everybody can find at your store.
So, yeah, the biggest thing we advocate, particularly with kiting, is the safety aspect of it. So it's something that, like I said, people do get injured kiting because it is such a powerful thing where it's not like a windsurfing sail or a wing where if you let it go, it stops.
Yeah.
A kite will continue to drag until you release it.
Yeah. Okay. So windsurfing, what are your tips in regards to this particular sport?
Well, windsurfing, the safety side of it's not as big as what kiteboarding is. However, the windsurfing thing, the first thing is put a life jacket on, because you're on a board that has a sail. So when you fall off, it will travel.
Yeah.
And can travel. So you want to have a life jacket on so that you can make sure you stay floating between getting there. And with your windsurfing rig and your kit and your parts and your pieces, you've got your board, and your board generally, when you're learning, you need quite a large board so you can stand on it easily. You can balance nice and easily.
Right, yeah.
They usually have a center board when you're learning so that it helps stabilize the board and helps you to go upwind while you're learning.
Yeah.
So the board doesn't drift sideways.
Yeah.
Yeah, then of course, with your sails, depending on the age of the person, the size of the person and that sort of thing, you need the right size. You start off with a smaller one, whether it be an inflatable one where the boom and mast are inflated so they float, so they're super light and easy to pull out of the water.
Yeah.
And versus your rig kits where your mast and your boom, or your mast is a carbon composite, your boom's an alloy boom that will be adjustable so that you can trim it to the right size sails, and of course the sail itself, that it suits the use for what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So last but not least, the latest trend. What's your tips on wing surfing?
Yep. Well, a lot of guys, to save the confusion, call it wingdinging. So
Wingding. Buck, buck, buck.
that's the slang term for it at the moment. The guys don't mind being called wingdingers. Wingding's similar to windsurfing in a lot of ways. A board for winging is substantially smaller, maybe 6'6", for winging for learning versus a windsurfing board that's going to be 10 to 12 foot.
Right. Okay.
So the on the board for winging, you've got a leash to attach the board to you, and you've got the wing, and the wing is also on a leash that's attached to you. So unlike windsurfing, the board's not going to get away from you. The good thing about, the interesting thing with kiteboarding, you can fly a kite on the sand.
Yeah.
And on the light days and learn to fly the kite, and practice with it. Where on a windsurf board, you're generally on the water with it.
Yeah.
And with the wing, initially, a lot of people are actually getting on skateboards on the wing.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, I have seen that.
So they're riding around the car parks, learning all their stuff on the wing, which makes it far, far easier and a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of the parents who are learning, their kids are whizzing around on skateboards on the wing, and they're doing stuff that I can't do yet, and they're going to be on the water riding it before I can.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of that is when you're young, you have no fear. You don't let life dictate to you through failures or, you just sort of get out and give it a go, and it's a beautiful thing, really.
So, and the last thing I didn't say about with the wing boards, the windsurfing, the other thing you need is a foil.
Okay.
So, or hydrofoil, but
that makes sense when you think
so
about
that
Sydney ferries. Yeah.
So, and with that hydrofoil, it's one of the things that really makes the wing foiling what it is.
Yeah.
So, hydrofoiling now have crossed into all water sports these days. So, the windsurfing has seen a massive resurgence over the last 4 years.
Yep.
Since foiling's come into windsurfing. And the wing itself was actually, there were wings around back in the 80s, but because they really wouldn't push a windsurfing board around, it wasn't until somebody made a wing with a foil board and went, hey, this is an amazing new sport. Okay. So and that's so we've been winging now for 3.5 years, when the first wings landed in Australia.
Okay. I can relate to that from a female's perspective. Back in the days when I was younger, when you got your hair streaked, they'd just call it streaks. Now they call it foils. So, you get sections, you foil them up. Whatever. Sounds a bit blonde, but hey. And in light of what you were saying, I think about paragliding. Everybody, it's something that I thought about pursuing. And like I said before, you've got to have PPE. There's always LH&S stuff that factor into it. Paragliding, it looks great, but if you're not controlling and you're not, your head's not in the game, it can drag you under. You need to really be mindful, have the right gear, have the right supplies to get that ultimate experience. Yeah,
and that's, at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
We're doing these sports to get out and have fun.
Yeah, that's right.
And one of our jobs here, although safety is a massive part of it, we want to make sure everybody gets on the water and really enjoys what they're doing. And we've had kids as young as 6-7 years old out kite surfing, and one of my favourite customers, Warrick, had his 75th birthday a couple of weeks ago, and he's out on the wing foil.
Wow.
Every day, and he's out there more than I am.
Wow.
And he's come across all the sports. So I met Warrick back when I started working with Andy 20 odd years ago, and he was a windsurfer and had been windsurfing longer than I had. I started when I was 6, and I can't remember what age he'd started at, but he'd spent more time windsurfing than I had. And to see him go from windsurfing to kite surfing when it came through, I think I was teaching him kite surfing when he was 60. and and then he got into the foiling on the kite surfing first, in order to get out in lighter winds, and he started foil sup surfing, so on the stand-up paddleboard with a foil, when he would have been, I think, it was before he was 70, but close to it. And now he's been on the wing now, and for a couple of years, and he absolutely loves it. It's his favourite sport.
So if people were looking to get amongst it and start a new sport, what would they need to start up and get out there, in regards to costs, supplies, training?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a really hard one at the
I
moment.
thought as much.
I mean, the first thing is lessons, of course.
Of course.
So, I mean, lessons for kite surfing, absolutely essential.
Yeah.
You'll learn more in one lesson in 2 hours than you will in a year by yourself.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
so that first lesson is really essential for kiting. Lesson prices are generally around about $250 these days for a 2-hour lesson for kiting.
Yep.
Windsurfing and wing surfing. I mean, our lesson prices are $180 for 2 hours.
That's reasonable.
And that's an individual one-on-one lesson. So, and those lesson prices were $150 for about 10 years. So,
wow. Okay. So yeah, great.
those prices haven't changed much. And then when you look at purchasing gear, a lot of people are trying to find secondhand stuff. Most people know with the COVIDs, with the lockdowns, with reduced capacity to manufacture, there's less goods being produced, there's less goods freighting into Australia, and the demand for new gear is higher than ever.
Of course.
And people are running out of new stocks. And that's driven the second-hand market into overdrive. We've got no second-hand windsurf boards in the shop.
Yeah.
We've got no second-hand wing boards in the shop, and we've barely got new stuff in the shop. So supply is actually quite difficult in those sports at the moment. Kiting actually is probably one of the more expensive sports that's become cheaper because there's so much second-hand gear around. And you do pay for what you get when you get into the sports. I know with windsurfing, we do see guys who've picked up a board or a sail or bits and pieces at different garage sales, or even on curbside pickups, because there's windsurfing boards floating around since the 80s.
Yeah.
So they'll pick up something that's 20 years old or even 15 years old, and the cost of fitting that out, if they need a boom and they've got to spend $150 on a boom or $200 on a mast, and that suddenly says, oh, well, it's too expensive now. So the windsurfing, if you were to buy a new windsurfing kit for a windsurf board, and you can get an inflatable windsurfing board these days for around about $1,000. For a sail, you can get a sail rig kit for around about $1,000 as well. So windsurfing, you're spending around about $2,000 at a minimum spend to get into with basic gear. If you're buying more advanced gear, the guys are spending up to five to 10 grand.
Wow.
The racing guys are spending $5,000 on one sail, on a sail mast and boom kit. So it comes down to which sport, how you want to do that sport.
Yeah.
With kiteboarding, secondhand kites, and kiteboarding has been around now. Most people don't realise. I mean, I've been teaching kiting for over 20 years. So there's now kites that have been around for quite a few years that guys are selling for $200 or $300. But a $200 or $300 kite generally has issues with the bladders, and a lot of people pick up a kite, bring it in, and ask me what it's going to cost to fix and get it going. And it's usually more than what they've paid for it again, like old windsurfing gear.
Yeah.
So my advice with guys kiting is don't buy something more than 4 years old.
Yeah, you got to weigh up the pros and cons, and I mean, how can you put a price on something like that anyway? You know, the initial outlay and the joy that you get from those moments and that experience would far outweigh the cost.
Yeah.
And so, live that bucket list, get out amongst it, and as I said before, don't let age define you, and try something new.
Yeah. So, but I mean, a new kiteboarding kit, your bare minimum spend on a new kiteboarding kit these days is somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000
Yeah.
generally
Yeah.
for a board, a kite, a bar and lines, your pump, in order to get you going.
Yeah.
And with the winging, the big thing with winging, you've got your wing, which is generally between $900 and $1,500. Your board's generally between 1,500 and 2,500.
Yeah.
And then you've got your foil, which is generally between 1,500 and 3,500.
Yeah.
So with the wing kits, you're spending your minimum spend generally is somewhere between that $4,000 and $5,500.
Yeah.
So and everybody's scampering to find secondhand gear in a sport that's only been around for 3 years,
Yeah.
and um, we're struggling to get new gear in the country, and the gear that's been around for 3 years, the guys are getting basically brand new prices on at the moment.
Yeah. Well, that's a great deal, isn't it?
One of the really interesting things is with kiteboarding, you have to wear a harness.
Right.
Your kite's attached to you. You need it in order to physically hold the kite.
Yeah.
With windsurfing, as soon as you reach a certain level, everybody's wearing a harness because you're pushing so much pressure and power across the water, holding such a big sail.
Yeah.
With winging, we're not using harnesses.
That's great.
Because the wing and the foil is so efficient, or rather, the wing's not really efficient, but the foil is so efficient. There's so little pressure in your arms that if I'm going to go kiting for an hour, I've got to wear a harness. If I'm going to windsurf for an hour, I'll need to wear a harness. But I'll go winging for an hour and no harness needed because the pressure's that light.
So for those out there that might want to try this new sport, is there a trial sort of period that you can come out and experience that sport without actually outlaying too much of a cost? Or
So, well, these days we generally don't do what they call free trial days anymore. The internet killed free trials because
okay.
people would go and try gear, and then they'd go and buy it on whoever had the cheapest gear available.
Yeah.
So our lessons are structured so that when we do a lesson and the gear is included in the lesson to use, that at the end of the lesson they can have X amount off the purchase of equipment.
Okay.
So that they're getting the value from the lesson in two aspects.
So, and a question I wanted to ask: do you provide paddleboard lessons or participate in that sport?
Yes, we run stand-up paddleboard lessons. Catherine, who's one of the staff members here, she actually runs a weekly class, which, when I say weekly, prior to COVID, it was happening twice a week.
Yep.
And once in the morning on a Saturday and once on a Friday afternoon. And that was a very cheap $15 session to go and use one of our boards or bring your own board and join her for that session. Going forward, I know the pricing on that will change, but she's really looking forward to being back out on the water. She has really missed those times.
I bet. Yeah.
So, but our usual sup classes for Saturday mornings are, I think we've got them down as $35 or $40.
Yeah.
And I think Sunday's just slightly dearer. Stand-up paddleboarding, I still don't think it's hit its peak in some ways. It's been around now for, I think I've been teaching SUP for 10 years.
Yeah.
But the advent or the new Audi and King's cheap inflatable boards, what they've done is, instead of producing a paddleboard for retail sales, they've produced a paddleboard for advertising.
Oh, okay.
So in order to promote their self and their brand and their product, they've just gone, well, let's release this product in the market at cost or below, and put it out there to promote our products. And so it's brought a lot of families that thought it might be too dear onto the water and into those sports. But it's also given people an unreal expectation of what it actually costs to do those sports.
Right.
If they come to our shop and ask us for a paddleboard, our prices seem unusually high compared to what they're paying for this Kings or Aldi board.
I guess that leaves the market wide open for somebody who is Australian and could manufacture these goods?
There's actually a lot of Australian manufacturers, but what they're doing is they're producing customs. We work with several custom shapers and that sort of, and we recommend several custom shapers throughout Newcastle, Wollongong, and Queensland.
Yeah, that's fabulous. So, is there any other water sports that you might like to talk about that you provide lessons for or supply?
With us, stand-up paddleboarding, kiteboarding, windsurfing, wingsurfing, and what we call the foil board sports, which are foil boarding across kiteboarding, windsurfing, and stand-up paddleboarding foiling.
Yep.
And prone foiling or surfboard foiling.
Yep.
So that's the sports we do.
Yep.
And the foiling stuff is, of course, the biggest part of the market at the moment and stuff, because it's such a new growing sport. And when I say it's such new, it's still new to Newcastle in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
We've been doing foiling for over 7 years now, but a lot of people in Newcastle are still seeing it for the first time.
Right.
So the other thing I would give a shout out to, we're a big supporter of locals, and and we've got a lot of local support as well. So we sponsor and we encourage people to go to the Marmong Windsurfing Club or Windsurfing Marmong Point.
Yep.
Toronto Sailing Club for Windsurfing One Designs.
Yes.
And of course Lake Macquarie Sup Club over at Spears Point. Newcastle Sup Club, who runs sup surf competitions in Newcastle. They also do a few other comps around the place in Scott's Head and Port Stephens.
Yeah.
But we're proud to support those clubs, and we want other people to make sure they get to those clubs and support them as well.
Well, thank you, David, for your story from Kite and Sup. It's been wonderful to talk to you. Hopefully people will get on board, literally, and check you out. Feel free to drop into David's store at Warners Bay, and life be in it. I say get out amongst it.
Yeah, I should mention, we've got the Kite and Sup and Foil Board Sports Instagram pages, as well as the Kite and Sup and Foil Board Sports Facebook pages.
Fabulous.
And the 2 web pages as well.
Okay, well, we'll be sure to post all those links up, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
No, pleasure, guys.
So with Christmas coming up, I just thought that I'd let everybody know that we have a range of products and merchandise available with Little Big Ole Me's logo, and other products with funny memes that I think are funny. So check out our merch store. I'm sure you might find there's something there for everybody, ranging from swimmers, drink bottles, backpacks, bum bags, singlets, underwear, men's and ladies. So yeah, do yourself a favour, check out our merch and support Little Big Ole Me. I just wanted to make mention that if you have a story that you would like to share with Little Big Ole Me and to Australia and to the world, please contact me at Sandra at Little Big Ole Me. I'd love to hear from you. Have a great day, Little Big Ole Me.